Moving over to our other semifinal match, Benjamin Lundquist up a game against Nathan Calvin, who appears to be taking a mulligan. Is that a 5-card mulligan?
Doesn't look like very many cards.
Leads off with a Watery Grave.
And you see Lundquist is one game number 1. He's going to start with Soldier of the Pantheon for game number 2 after taking 2 from Sacred Foundry. Going to push himself down to 18. Calvin does have another land. He's got a Hallowed Front that's going to be tapped. Also has a Godless Shrine too, so even though he did mulligan, it looks like his hand is okay.
He has a Jace, a Detention Sphere. I mean, a pretty reasonable 5-card hand.
You know, one of the things, however, with Lundquist's deck is he's going to play Temple of Triumph here and Scry, is that Soldier is so very good against the Esper deck, as the Dryad Militant's going to show up. Protection from Multicolored is great against this deck, as you see Calvin draw in Azorius Charm.
Yes.
And he's also, again, looking at a Detention Sphere. He's going to play that Godless Shrine tapped and just pass the turn back.
It seems kind of silly to say that something like Soldier Pantheon is very good against Esper because you have so many creatures, but all it requires is for you to time your removal spells, or sorry, your creatures that you're playing in such a way to get an extra 2 points because your Soldier goes unchecked through an Azorius Charm, and that's often the difference between winning and losing.
You saw Calvin tap his mana and wants to consider casting Azorius Charm. Does cast on the Dryad Militant, so that's going to go back on top. Pretty poor draw moving forward, but that means that Calvin's not cycling the Azorius Charm for a new card. Lundquist's going to gain 1 life off of the multicolored spell, and he's going to follow up with a Frontline Medic, and don't ignore that Mutavault he just played.
No. And Lundquist with Boros Charm in hand, so all he needs to do is get in front on the board enough to be able to hold up mana.
Yep.
We know that Nathan has access to Supreme Verdict, so he won't be able to set that up for a little while, but
that Sphere has put Frontline Medic in detention. Now Lundquist, considering his options here, because he does have multiple, he has another Frontline Medic, excuse me, he has multiple Boros Elites that he could cast this turn too. So I think he's trying to figure out, how do I want to set this turn? Do I want to fire at Mutavault, get in for 4, put you to 12 and play a 1-drop, or do I just want to get in for 2 and then play a Frontline Medic and pass?
yeah. I personally prefer playing the Frontline Medic because I think playing the just playing the smaller creatures and activating Mutavault exposes you pretty heavily to Jace here.
Sure.
So I would just rather get these Frontline Medics out of my hand.
I think that's the card that I would rather be better against is Jace. But he's going to actually fire up the Mutavault. He's going to attack for 4, put him down to 12, and going to follow up with the Dryad Militant that was put on top from Azorius Charm and pass the turn back. Here is that Jace that we did mention. That's going to move up, of course. Watery Grave coming to play tapped and pass the turn back. Calvin left with just a single Supreme Verdict in hand.
But this is not a bad board for Nathan to have, given that he was on a 5-card hand. The Supreme Verdict backup and the Jace in play.
And one thing you did see there, too, is that Lundquist drew a Mizium Mortars for the turn, wondering why that's in the deck after sideboard. Well, Calvin does have access to Bloodbearing of Escopa. You want to make sure that your white deck isn't drawing dead to that card, so Lundquist has that angle covered. Now he has to figure out how to get through the Planeswalker here.
Yeah, this is just... I think Lundquist is correctly going to Boros Charm this Jace instead of holding the Boros Charm up. As Jace just puts him in such a squeeze and reduces the quality of all of his 2/1s so much. Ideally, you would like to hold Boros Charm as a trump, but this is a fine line as well.
Yeah, and this is a tough spot for Calvin too, because this isn't the best Supreme Verdict in the world. It's just a 2-for-1, but this is kind of what you have to do with it.
Yep.
You have to get those creatures off the board and just reset and hope that you just draw into a card like Sphinx's Revelation to be able to refuel yourself. Ben has all the options in his hand. You see again those multiple Boros Elites. He's got that Medic. He has the Mutavault in play just through a Temple of Triumph. So he's going to start there by scrying and working with information before making his plays. There's double Boros Elite, and the third creature, oh, that's just Mutavault.
Yeah. Battalion plus Mutavault rears its ugly head once again.
6 mana. There's a Rev.
Not a bad draw, of course, for Nathan. Probably the best draw that afforded to him.
He draws another Revelation, actually a land too, so he's got a Godless Shrine, and he has not played a land yet. So hopefully he doesn't forget to play one, because yeah, his draw step was just Revelation.
Yeah, he had no cards in hand, so he hasn't made a land drop yet.
And this land drop is certainly going to be important. I think both players may be making sure that life totals are correct in this situation. And Nathan's had enough.
He's just disconnecting, it appears.
Boros Elite, I'm tired of it. In reality, he's asking the judge a question away from the table, but he's also just had enough.
Yeah. So Lundquist sitting on a hand of Frontline Medic and Mizium Mortars. Nathan just ripping a Sphinx's Revelation, fighting an Azorius Charm and a Sphinx's Revelation. So Nathan's sort of clawing his way back into this thing.
Boros Charm, a huge draw there from Lundquist.
Yeah, that's the best possible draw.
Yeah. So there's an attack for 3, 6, 7, 8. It's going to put Calvin down to 6. Boy, is Boros Charm just not a fun card to play against.
Well, if you're Esper, it's not like Nathan's. Yeah. It's not like Nathan's trying to let his opponent have a bunch of fun here.
Yeah, you're right about that. You make a good point. As Calvin has drawn a land for the turn to go along with his Revelation and his Azorius Charm here, so the Boros Elite are threatening a kill on the following turn.
Yeah, and if he doesn't drop Boros Charm there, Lundquist is actually in a bit of a squeeze, right? Because he can play frontline medic to hedge against another Revelations, but he exposes himself to Supreme Verdict. If he sandbags the frontline medic, he might lose to just random removal spells or another Rev. The Boros Charm is the best of both worlds, as he gets to apply a lot of pressure and still hedge against both Supreme Verdict, which he can make his team indestructible, and Sphinx's Revelation, which is just not going to impact the board enough.
The squeeze.
The squeeze.
The squeeze, as it were. So let's see what Calvin can come up with to get out of this situation. There's a Hallowed Fountain tapped and just pass the turn back. Can't afford to play it untapped. If he does, he gets charmed right out of the ballgame.
Yep.
You see Lundquist here. I thought he might fire off the Boros Charm in the unstep, but decides not to.
Well, he's not going to do anything else with his mana, so we might as well see what Nathan is going to do. No reason to run that thing into a potential counter.
Yeah. And he says, fire at Mutavault yet again. How about the red zone? Double trigger on the battalion. Says this is lethal. Now that Revelation will be for 1, 2, 3, 4. So we count up to 6. This attack is for 3, 6, 7, 8. So we might see him fire off an Azorius Charm here, but we know that Azorius Charm isn't good enough either because of that Boros Charm and grip.
Yeah.
He says Rev for a bunch. Ben says
little. So this is exact. No, it's legal.
yeah. Says I'll show you a Boros Charm, and that is going to be it. So Ben Lundquist, your 1 seed with Boros, is moving on to the finals to play against James Gates' mono red Devotion deck. Nathan Calvin with a very impressive tournament with Esper Control.